Welcome to Sticky, Stories That Stick. Join me, Amelia Forzak, as I sit down with master storytellers to explore what makes some narratives unforgettable. Let's get started. Hi, I'm Amelia Forzak. On the Sticky podcast, I talk with leaders about how to tell stories that stick with audiences. Whether you're speaking, writing, or just trying to connect, there's something here for you. Today, I have a very exciting guest with us, but first I just have to let you know that this episode is brought to you by Pithy Wordsmithery, a boutique firm founded by yours truly. I'm a New York Times bestselling ghostwriter, and I love helping people write and publish their books. My team and I have helped many authors turn their stories into bestsellers and their brands into thought leadership platforms. Our readership is in the hundreds of thousands, so even if you haven't heard of us, there's a decent chance you've read something we've written. If you've ever thought about writing a book, check us out online at pithywordsmithery.com. Today, I have Angie Roullier with me. Angie is a thought leader in the cannabis space. Her journey in the industry began after discovering cannabis as a treatment for Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease, which led to work as a budtender, shop manager, team leader, cannabis educator, and now an author to promote cannabis education and compassion and chemistry. Angie, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Amelia.
I love that we're talking about cannabis in relation to storytelling because it has all the elements of an interesting topic. Like, people have strong feelings about it. The industry's changing rapidly. The laws are changing. There's so much to talk about.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot going on, and you'd be hard pressed to find somebody who doesn't have a cannabis story.
Yeah. So I'd love to start at the beginning. Tell me a little bit about how you got into the industry.
So I was a mother, single mom, mid-30s, and I had found out that my kidneys were starting to fail. And I had gone to the doctor, and they just kind of shrugged their shoulders and said that was to be expected from a lifetime of taking medication for my CMT, Charcot-Marie-Tooth. At that point, a light bulb went over my head, and I found it unacceptable. So Michigan has had a cannabis program here since 2008, and this is probably around 2009, 2010. And I decided to look into it. At first, I had called kind of bullshit on, cannabis as being medicine. How can something that I have been using in parking lots in high school all of a sudden be good for me? And all of a sudden, be considered medicine. So I really started to look into the science behind it to see how it works and how it doesn't work. And being somebody that can kill a cactus and can't grow a damn thing herself, I got myself a caregiver who was actually quite knowledgeable. And he knew, the different compounds in the plant, what did what didn't do the things that I was looking for. And slowly I got to wean myself off of this medication and turn almost completely to cannabis. And I will say, and I will shout this from the rooftops constantly, don't do this by yourself. Make sure that your doctor knows that you are trying to swap out your medication, because this is something that has to be monitored. You don't want to do yourself more harm by using cannabis as medicine.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's so interesting. You had been taking like pharmaceuticals your whole life for a condition, and you weren't having like perfect results with that. And so looking for something that was like a little bit more natural for was it mostly pain or other symptoms?
It was the pain. There's a lot of muscle wasting, so it's almost considered a wasting disease. And it wasn't so much, me trying to replace the medications. It was me trying to get rid of these side effects. As a single mom, I mean, as a mother, you've got to be present. And when they keep throwing pills at you and, you've got side effects of, you're drowsy, you're out of it, things like that, you really can't function 100% and be the best mom that you can be. So these were the things that I was trying to get rid of instead of having a pile of pills, at my dinner plate. And, seeing my daughter see me take these was not something, that I wanted to impress upon her. And, I totally explained to her, what I was trying to do, why is mom smoking weed in the garage? And it's like, well, this is, this is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to, replace pharmaceuticals with plant medicine. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't work, but, be patient with mama.
Yeah. It's so interesting because the perceptions here are so different depending on even what generation you're a part of, what state you're located in, like what kind of upbringing you had. Like people are sometimes very open-minded about cannabis and have been using it for years, and other times people are very judgy about it. So I think there are a lot of preconceived notions about it. How have you seen that change over the years?
It's definitely people are getting a little bit more open-minded. They're coming out of the canna closet, as we like to say. You get a lot, at least when I was working in the shop, we would get a lot of people who says, I haven't touched it since college, or things like that. And because it's become, more out in the open, they're a little bit more open to speaking about it. And then you got other people that are absolutely just digging their heels into the dirt and, will not budge. One of my favorite arguments with these people is so they're considering rescheduling cannabis and they're going to knock it down to a Schedule 3. And in Schedule 3 are steroids. So one of my arguments with these people is I said, well, I wouldn't judge you for getting a cortisone shot in your knee. Why are you judging me for taking a gummy to go to sleep? And, it kind of gets them to see that, their business is their business. My business is my business. As long as I'm not hurting anybody, why should anybody have an opinion?
Yeah. There's like a lot of gray space, right? With what makes something okay, like why is alcohol okay and marijuana is not, or there's just you can argue it in so many different directions. It just feels like it's a difficult topic, right?
It really is. And when people throw that, oh, well, alcohol is federally legal, argument at you, and it's like, oh, yeah, because the government does fantastic jobs of making decisions for us. It's like, come on. That's the soapbox that you're going to stand on, just because the government says it's okay. Must mean that it's safe and, it's, accepted in society. Oh, come on.
That's so funny. I mean, there are a lot of folks out there that are just like good law-abiding people. They want to follow the law because they believe that's the right thing to do, or at least they think that if you don't follow the law and you get caught, you mess your life up, which is definitely true. But as these laws are changing, it's sort of it's prompting us to reevaluate how we feel about things, and having these core beliefs challenge is a really difficult thing, right? It's hard to change people's opinions.
It is. Yeah. And especially if they were raised that way. I mean, that is ingrained, since birth, that these are the things that you do. These are the things that you don't do. My own parents, they both went to U of M in Ann Arbor, of all places, and yet we're completely against cannabis. I'm like, did you not go to class? I mean, this is in the 60s. Were you not paying attention? And little by little, and a lot of it seemed to help with my parents anyways, when I showed them the hard science. And we're not talking, High Times Magazine or Reddit. I'm talking, things that come out of John Hopkins, or the Mayo Clinic. That kind of helped them to come along to, yeah, this could possibly, help others. And if it does, again, it's not your business. You don't have to partake, but if it's going to help a cancer patient get their appetite back, who are you to deny them that?
Mm-hmm. I think all the success stories from people who are really using cannabis to make a difference, I think is also such a just a sign that it's working. I have a friend who's had cancer 3 times, and at this point she's essentially just has like chronic pain that she tries to manage, and she has twin boys who are 9, and that's a lot, right? And so she uses cannabis, and it's honestly the only thing that's really been working for her so that she can still be functional and not in pain. Yeah, I think the more we're able to share stories like that, and like you said, the science. So now that it's not the 70s anymore and we have decades more of scientific research behind cannabis, are you finding that there are more facts and just studies that you can point to that that sort of just speak to why this should be legal and needed?
Oh, absolutely. And I tell people all the time, when I speak in groups, don't listen to me. Listen to the science. Here, I've got, hundreds of references in my books that are directly related to the science. Go ahead, fall down the rabbit hole, because people like to throw that in my face that I'm not medically trained in any way. No, but I was taught to read at a young age, and I can grasp, sentences. Do I get it all? No, absolutely not. But here is the science, please. Take it, read it, and see how it applies or doesn't apply to your life. So the science has been really helpful, and we are so far behind. I mean, there's so many other countries that have been doing this since the 70s. So I implored that people don't just look at, the science that's coming out of the United States, go beyond our borders and look into what they're finding out, how it helps and how it harms. I mean, cannabis isn't perfect. It is a drug. It can do great things, but it can also do not such great things. So you really need to have some personal responsibility when it comes to, using cannabis as medicine for yourself.
Yeah, you're bringing up a point. It's like sometimes it can be fun, but it's also medicine, right? So there's two different ways that people use it. And depending on where you're located in, if you're in the US, that makes a difference if you're using it for recreation or you're using it for medicine. And so I know that I have both of your books here, and you've been working on training the people at shops, bud tenders, as they're called, for consulting with patients, especially medical patients, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So here in Michigan, again, we started with the medical market, and then it almost seemed to like go recreational overnight. I do believe that was a mistake on the part of the government, but they saw dollar signs and they wanted to get as much as they could. The day before we went recreational, we had almost 400,000 registered patients and caregivers for cannabis. Today, we have maybe 30,000. Okay, these people just didn't stop using cannabis. They just didn't, disappear and decide, oh, okay, guess it's not for me. They're still there. The difference is they didn't want to be on a list. And you really can't blame them for not wanting to put all of their information out there and being on a list that says that they use cannabis. So these people are still bellying up to the counters. It's just the bud tenders aren't being trained to treat them as patients. They're just being trained for, let's get the biggest cart, basket, let's get the most sales, let's, turn them and burn them. And to me, that's where the cannabis, culture is starting to, it's being lost. So I really push that compassion and chemistry together, hence the tagline of my book, that they both can go together. Whether somebody's using it recreationally or medically, I like to think that, for the people that I train, when they leave the shop, they know a little bit more about cannabis than when they walked in, whether they asked for it or not.
I love that. And I'm so surprised that so many of these medical patients are now being classified as recreation. And it's also cheaper for them to do that, correct? Well, not for buying, but for you don't have to pay for your medical card.
Well, we do. And so the medical card can range anywhere from $50 to $200. It's good for 2 years. But a lot of pot shops, they won't charge you that 10% sin tax, because you're a medical patient. So you actually are saving money by being a medical patient. And you can buy whatever you want in the shop. It's not like, it used to be to where medical is segregated on this side of the store, rec is on this side of the store. It's all together now. And a lot of these shops are just dropping that sin tax. Michigan actually just passed a 24% wholesale tax on cannabis recently. We tried to fight it. We got denied. So we will be the second highest taxed cannabis market in the country. And may I say that this is the only medicine that is taxed in the United States. So do with that political little tidbit what you will. So yeah, it's a mess.
24% is huge. I'm in Illinois.
Top of sales tax.
Oh my God. I'm in Illinois. I don't know what our tax is currently for.
Fair.
Yeah. It's I was like, are we number one? Because we might be.
Yeah. Well, you guys usually are. I mean, you guys do have a crazy tax. What is your sales tax? Like 11%? or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's not. So this was just, and our governor says it's, it's to fix the roads and, all of these things. But what they don't understand is that sales tax is going to put a lot of these businesses out of business. And therefore now your numbers are off. And, and a little insult to injury, they keep claiming that they're going to get 420 million for the roads. 420. Come on.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean that's another story too, is like the money side of it. Why are we legalizing it and how can we profit from it? I think that's what a lot of the states are doing, and that's kind of what's driving a lot of decisions.
Yeah.
Have you seen that affect like just how regular people feel about legalization, is like how the money could be used?
Well, I've seen it do a lot of good things. I've seen them, put up parks. I've seen them, fund this and fund that. I mean, cannabis absolutely should be ingrained into the community and it should be doing things. But when they see how well here in Michigan cannabis was actually doing, they decided to fleece it. And I think what they don't understand is if you put 50% of these businesses out of business, well, there goes your dollar amount. You know what I mean? Now you're no longer at 420 million for the roads. You're putting all of these mom and pops out of business. And I know a lot of bud tenders are sweating it. I know a lot of pot shops are actually stocking up because this goes into effect January 1st. So I think it's going to do more harm than good. And I don't know about Illinois, but here in Michigan, we've been fixing the roads since the beginning of time, and they just never seem to get fixed, no matter where they pull the money from. So I think they're just using that as an excuse to pull that money out of the industry and, disperse it where they will.
Mm, the lovely government.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So I'd like to hear more about these books. So you had Pot for the People came out recently, correct?
A couple of years now. It's been
Uh,
out. Yeah.
this is the new one.
That is the new one. Yeah.
So the Bud Tenders Blueprint, Compassion and Chemistry at the Cannabis Counter. Tell me more about how long you've worked in the industry and how you've come to realize all the things in this book, because there are great tips in here and great training.
So come February, I've been at it 16 years. Out of that 16, I would say about 10 was behind the counter. And like you had said in the intro, I mean, I started at the bottom and I worked my way all the way up. And I kept getting the same questions over and over again. And you kept seeing where policy, whether it was state sanctioned or whether it was just the owners of the company wanted things done a certain way, I found that there were better ways to treat people with compassion as they came in and to use the science behind it, again, to try and give them the information so they can make educated decisions for themselves. And, as it evolved, because I did start in the black market, to where it was just a free for all. Nobody was telling you nothing. There was, no requirements on packaging. We did have a minimum of 2.5 ounces a day, which is a lot. And that still carried through into the regulated market. But the biggest thing for me and why I decided to continue into the regulated market is because I wanted to bring that compassion with me. I wanted to bring that culture of the cannabis community into this multi-state, everything looks like an Apple store, kind of vibe. And budtenders, they get their butt kicked on a daily basis. It's not an easy job. You're on your feet, 12 hours a day. You get, people who are, in tremendous amounts of pain. You get, all kinds of walks of life that come in. So in the book, I actually really try to target how to defend yourself and, how to react on a human level. So you're going to find that a lot of people behind the counter are probably between the ages of 18 and let's say 25. Here in Michigan, the middle of the road patient demographic is probably about 45 to 55. Okay, so there's a generational disconnect. That 65-year-old veteran is probably not going to be too keen to, pick up on the advice of the 22-year-old. who's trying to sell. So I really try to teach, how to bridge that gap. And using veterans as an example, hire veterans, have them behind the counter. And when they, register, make sure that those patients actually go, to that veteran, and automatically, that disconnect is broken. So, things like that. I really try to get into, with the book, along with the science, and trying to teach people how to give a shit is not as easy as you would think.
Yeah. I mean, any kind of customer facing role, especially with the general public, is just a hard job. And so you are working with workers who are sort of just like younger, less experienced. Um, and then just how the industry has changed and all of the information and choices that are available now, it is almost like a completely different world than like the marijuana that was from 10, 20, 30 years ago. And so it even if you're an experienced, cannabis user coming into a shop like that does feel completely like you're landing on another planet sometimes.
Yeah, it can be really overwhelming. Because a lot of these places, I mean, there's thumping loud music, there's a zillion colors on the wall. You walked in just knowing that you want something for headaches. You know what I mean? And and then here you are, just blasted with this, this culture, or lack of. Like I said, a lot of them look like Apple stores. To which, a lot of the older generation actually prefer, because it's quieter. It's a little bit more one-on-one. It's calmer. They feel a little bit calmer. But in Pot for the People, I really try to impress upon the layman, do some education before you go in. At least have an idea of what you're looking for. And, that is going to help your consultation. It's also going to help your bud tender to help you.
Oh, that's great advice. Tell me more about the kinds of things that, say you're walking into a shop, what are the kinds of things that you should share or would be helpful to tell the bud tender so that they can direct you to something that could help you?
So unpopular opinion, I'm a firm believer that there should be a sign in the lobby that says cannabis does have drug interactions. So if you have a prescription that actually has a grapefruit warning on it, cannabis carries the same warning.
Wow.
So I believe that should come out of every bud tender's mouth, at least at some point in the conversation. So what we have to remember, as bud tenders and as consumers, is we want cannabis to help people. We're not, in this to see cannabis harm people. And the more information that we share with each other, the better off that, both sides are going to be. The consumer is going to have a heads up on what they're going to be taking, and the bud tender is doing their due diligence in trying to help these people.
That is so interesting. I've never heard about the grapefruit thing. And I remember seeing that as
See,
a
and I
yeah,
looked up.
yeah, I remember seeing that as an issue with certain medications. Okay, so I'm definitely going to remember that. What else is important to know? What other drug interactions?
So I mean, so for example, like I said with the grapefruit warning, so you'll get, let's say you get a lot of elderly, consumers that come in. The odds that they're on blood thinners, it could actually make blood thinners more potent, which is obviously a bad thing. You cut yourself, and next thing you know, you're bleeding out. That is, already an issue with somebody who's taking blood thinners, but the fact that it can make it more potent, again, back to telling your doctor, hey, I'm starting to implement cannabis, into my life. Maybe, the dosage, or, at least, the doctor knows to take that into consideration. With epilepsy drugs, it makes them less efficient. So let's say you've been taking an epilepsy drug for, the last decade, it's working, you're seizure free, and then all of a sudden you decide you want to start taking gummies at night, and now your seizure medicine, potentially stops working. And now you're having seizures again. This goes back again to harming the patient with cannabis. So they really need to know this. And I know people are so skittish about talking to their doctors about putting cannabis, into their lives, but it's your health. It's your health care. You should never be skittish about saying anything to your doctor. If they don't approve or they don't want to work with you anymore, well, you know what? I have fired plenty of doctors for being idiots and just for not even looking up from my chart and not knowing my name. There's plenty of doctors out there.
You bring up a great point though, is like when people feel like they aren't empowered to ask questions and find out the right information, there could be huge consequences of that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And that goes with a lot of things. I mean, if somebody's putting away a fifth of Jack Daniels a day and doesn't tell their doctor, I mean, that's got huge, health, implications. So why should this be any different? And like you said before, there's still such a huge stigma on cannabis. And yes, it's starting to change. But unfortunately, a lot of our doctors are of a certain age and they're absolutely not going to change. Their ego is stuck in the mindset of I know what I know and I don't need to know anything else. So they refuse to budge. And, that might be a little unfair to put that on a certain age demographic because I've met plenty of younger doctors that are completely against it because they simply just don't teach it in medical school. They don't teach the endocannabinoid system in medical school, where it's the biggest regulatory system that we have in our body. So that is something that we absolutely have to get past if we are going to, start to use plants as medicine again.
Wow. So that makes me wonder, if I were to ask my doctor, would they even understand which drugs I'm taking interact with cannabis, number one? And then the other question people are probably wondering is, could your doctor get you in trouble if you tell them you smoke pot and you live in a state where it's not legal?
Well, snitches get stitches. So if they want to squeal, you absolutely need to have that conversation with them. And I highly doubt that a doctor has got enough energy in a day to be like, oh, Susie Smith is out there smoking reefer. You know what I mean? But, they may not want to see you as a patient anymore. And then if that's the case, well, kiss my ass. You're not into it for my best interest anyway, then. And then, back to your, does your doctor know if your drugs interact? Absolutely drop that little nugget right there that just says, does it have a grapefruit warning? I've done it at pharmacies, knowing damn well it does have a grapefruit, warning on it, and ask them, does it have a grapefruit warning? Because I take CBD. And CBD has the same, drug interaction as a grapefruit does. 99% of the time, they did not know that, but they did once I walked away. So you kind of have to be, proactive in it. And, you got to open your mouth, speak up for yourself.
Wow, that's crazy. Okay, so what about for people who are maybe no extreme medical conditions, otherwise fairly healthy, going into the cannabis store and they're looking for something to sleep better or for headaches or for like minor ailments, that kind of thing. What would help them get like the best possible product? Because there's so many options, right?
Yeah, there really is. And especially if they're brand new to it, low and slow. We say it throughout the entire industry. And there is a lot of trial and error when it comes to it. But I'm a big fan of starting somebody as low as like 2.5 milligrams. And, to add the other cannabinoids in there. So not just THC, start with CBD. I mean, CBD can, absolutely relax you to the point where, you know what I mean? They can take away the pain and therefore it helps you sleep better. It's amazing, you know what I mean? How much it's connected. Your headache may be connected to stress because you can't get your shoulders to drop. If you can take, CBD, which is, not intoxicating, to get those shoulders to drop, you might just get rid of the headache and then you don't have to take, either these pharmaceuticals or, these crazy high levels of THC. I'm a big fan of low and slow. I'm a big fan of keeping the entire plant together. So not just isolates. I've been training my husband now for 6 years. When I met him, he was smoking weed out of a pop can. He has come so far. I am so proud. But now he knows that, when you go into these places, he asks for whole plant. He doesn't want isolate. And there's so many studies out there that shows when you pull this plant apart, the magic is lost. And we understand from a scientific point that, yeah, you have to isolate every compound just to see what it does and see what it doesn't do. But in cannabis, when you can keep it all together, not only does it work better, but you don't hit that wall to where you do with pharmaceuticals, to where they have to keep upping your dosage because it stops working because your body gets used to it. That does not happen with whole plant medicine. So that is another question that I really impress upon people who have read Pot for the People is ask for that, whole plant, and it may be, smaller doses, but that's kind of the point for me for cannabis is it's not about taking a different kind of medicine. It's about taking less medicine and more natural medicine.
I have not even heard this, the whole plant. Tell me more about that. So it's different from just the flower or what?
So yeah, so what they're doing is they're taking this beautiful plant and then science is, they're pulling it apart and they're isolating THC. So if you have heard of like distillate is absolutely stripping it of everything in the plant. So not only, the cannabinoids, but the terpenes, the lipids, the waxes, they're stripping it out and it's nothing but pure THC. And it's crazy high potency. I mean, it can get up to like 99% pure THC. Okay, not something you want grandma taking before she goes to bed, because then she gets up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, she falls, she breaks a hip, and it back again to we have now hurt somebody with cannabis instead of helped them. So again, I understand that science likes to splice and dice, and then they think that they can shove it all back together. It's different. It absolutely changes something as far as, taking it as medicine. There absolutely is a difference. I'm a huge fan of one-to-one flower. Genetically, naturally, it comes with almost an even ratio of THC and CBD. Tiny little buzz, but it gets rid of, the spasms in, my legs. It allows me to sit at my desk for a couple of more hours. If I were to take a bud that is, bred for high THC and somebody had sprayed it with CBD, which they do, and it's disgusting, it's different. It's gross. It doesn't do what it does coming out of the ground the way that God made it.
Wow. Seriously, so interesting. I always see the like 1-to-1 or whatever the ratios are, and I'm like, I don't even know what this means.
You see, right. Then again, we need more education, and we need people, consumers, when they walk into a shop and they, meet Sally the bud tender, just go, hey, I've got a ton of questions. Do you have time? And make your grocery list of questions, or, because a lot of people forget, because again, you get overwhelmed, you're sitting in the parking lot, you're nervous. You're walking into what you've been told is a drug den, and all of a sudden it looks like an Apple store. So, there's a lot going on, but ask those questions. And we need bud tenders to start giving the right answers, to say that, yeah, this is, 1-to-1 is usually an even split of THC and CBD. And when you see it in edibles, it's most likely stripped down THC and distillate and strip down CBD and isolate, and then they just throw it into a gummy. To whereas if to ask for that whole plant, they can go digging. They shouldn't have to. They should absolutely know, what products they have on that are, on the shelves that are being used, whole plant.
Yeah. Do you have any brands that you can recommend for whole plant gummies or other formats? I don't know, for like oil, vapes.
Okay, I will say I hate to recommend brands because the minute I do, they do something shitty. You know what I mean? And now I've put my name on their brand. I will say brands that are consistent, that I'm a big fan of. There's a company out in Colorado. It's called Neverwinter Botanicals, and everything that they do is whole plant. They are beautiful. And as of right now, in the way that the government stands, they ship to all 50 states. They do gummies, they do topicals, they do tinctures, and they also do flower. And they are my absolute go-to at this point for any sort of different combinations and ratios. If you are walking into just a regular pot shop, whether it be, Chicago or Ann Arbor or whatever, I'm a big fan of Wild, WYLD. I like them because they have some of the minor cannabinoids in it that you don't normally find. So like CBG is, they're finding that it's great for gut health. And a lot of people are finding that, that they're getting, ups, belly aches and, things like that. So they're one of the few that actually carry some of these minor cannabinoids. And they do it well, and their product doesn't taste like shit.
That's awesome. That's so helpful. I'm usually asking for recommendations from budtenders, but I've never heard exactly the science behind it or why. Usually it's like people are like, oh, well, this makes me feel this way. And I'm like, okay, that's fine, but I'm not you. So maybe it would make me feel the same way too, but it's hard to know. So yeah, a little more education is very much appreciated.
Yeah. And again, and it helps when, I was always a big fan of hiring people with different afflictions. So I would have, a bud tender, that, had ADHD and, one that had IBS and, myself, with the CMT and the nerve damage and the wasting disease and, add a couple of veterans, corpsmen if you can get it because they're medically trained to begin with. And that way, not only are they commiserating with somebody who has the exact same problem they do, the recommendation is a little bit more solid. I mean, you're not going to walk into a pot shop and go, hey, got anybody here that's got IBS? That's not really a great conversation starter. But, they are out there. So I find that that's the recommendation comes in better because you're right. We're not the same. Everybody is going to handle it absolutely differently. And, that's what makes us human.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, I think you're doing great work. I'm so excited that we got introduced recently and these books, like you guys go out and check these out. Where can people buy these books?
Oh, well, if they want to support the author directly, they can get them from my site, Angie Roullier, ANGROULLIER.com. They will be signed and I will ship them out myself, or we can go with the necessary evil of Amazon. And they are also carried at bookshop.org, which is a really cool, they only support independent bookstores. So if I were to have my say, go with me, go with, bookshop.org, or you can always go with Amazon.
Amazing. Angie, thank you so much for being a guest today.
Thank you, Amelia. I appreciate it.
Again, I'm Amelia Forzak. I'm the founder of Pithy Wordsmithery. And to quote Toni Morrison, if there's a book you want to read but it hasn't been written yet, you must write it. Thanks for listening to Sticky, Stories That Stick. We'll see you again next time. Be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.